Women and Equalities. Labour is the party of equality, committed to achieving a world free from all forms of bigotry and discrimination. Whether campaigning on the streets or passing legislation in government, Labour is the only party to consistently stand with women, disabled people, people from ethnic minority backgrounds, and LGBT+ communities. The Conservatives have failed to tackle society's burning injustices. Instead, they have inflicted injustice after injustice on women, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic BMAE, and LGBT+ communities and disabled people. Over 85% of the burden of Tory Lib Dem cuts has fallen on the shoulders of women. Labour will create a new department for women and equalities with a full-time Secretary of State responsible for ensuring all our policies and laws are equality impact assessed in order to deliver a fairer society for women and all underrepresented groups. We will establish a modernised National Women's Commission as an independent advisory body to contribute to a Labour government. We are guided by our firm commitment to the Human Rights Act and Convention on Human Rights that have been consistently attacked by the Conservatives. We will ratify both the Istanbul Convention on Preventing Domestic Abuse and the ILO Commission on Violence and Harassment at Work. We will put class at the heart of Britain's equality agenda and create a new ground for discrimination on the basis of socio-economic disadvantage. Women. Labour will put women at the heart of our government and programme. Next year marks the 50th anniversary of the Equal Pay Act, yet women still earn 13% less than men. Labour will take action to close the gender pay gap by 2030. We will also deliver gender pay equality by making the state responsible for enforcing equal pay legislation for the first time. The new Workers' Protection Agency, working with HMRC, will ensure that employers take equal pay seriously and take positive action to close the gender pay gap. Women will no longer be left to take enforcement action by themselves through the courts. Require all employers with over 250 employees to obtain government certification on gender equality or face further auditing or fines. By the end of 2020, we will lower the threshold to workplaces with 50 employees whilst providing the necessary additional support for small businesses. Revolutionise parents' rights by increasing paid maternity leave from 9 to 12 months, doubling paternity leave to 4 weeks, and extending pregnancy protection. We will ban the dismissal of pregnant women without prior approval of the inspectorate, transform the workplace, and require all large employers to have flexible working, including a menopause policy, and consider changes to sickness and absence practices. Enable positive action for recruitment to roles where employers can justify the need for more diversity, and introduce a right for all workers to request flexibility over their hours from the first day of employment. Ensure that the single sex-based exemptions contained in the Equality Act 2010 are understood and fully enforced in service provision. Create a safer society for women and prioritise domestic abuse as a health issue. Introduce 10 days of paid leave for survivors of domestic abuse, and ensure women's refuges receive the long-term sustainable funding they need. Misogyny and violence against women and girls will become hate crimes. Increase women's representation across Parliament by building on the Equality Act passed by the last Labour government and enact Section 106 so that all political parties publish diversity data about electoral candidates. Race equality. Achieving racial equality is a bedrock Labour value. It has never been more important than in the current climate. We are proud of the way our country has been shaped by the contributions, cultures, and values of people from around the world. The Conservatives have fanned the flames of racism, using difference to divide. They have made BAME people pay the price for their austerity project and scapegoated refugees and migrants. Never was this starker than with their hostile environment, leading to the scandalous treatment of the Windrush generation. Hate crime has more than doubled in the last 5 years. This is a wake-up call for all of us. Labour will ensure a pathway to economic inclusion for all, putting an end to all forms of racism and discrimination in our economy and society. Inclusion will be at the heart of its programme for government. We will seek to end the politics of hate and commission an independent review into the threat of far-right extremism and how to tackle it. Put wealth and power in the hands of the many, extend pay gap reporting to BAME groups, and tackle pay discrimination on the basis of race. Commit our National Investment Bank to addressing discrimination in access to finance, which many BAME business owners face, and take action to ensure that BAME and women business owners have access to government contracts and spending. Implement recommendations of the Lamy Review to address the disparity of treatment and outcomes for BAME people within the criminal justice system. Create an emancipation educational trust to educate around migration and colonialism, and to address the legacy of slavery and teach how it interrupted a rich and powerful black history which is also British history. On religious discrimination, we will strengthen protection for religious communities and amend the law to include a tax on places of worship, including synagogues, temples, mosques and churches, as a specific aggravated offence. Review current levels of funding for and access to the Places of Worship Protective Security Funding Scheme, maintain funding in real terms for the Community Security Trust, and consult on giving it statutory protection to ensure that religious communities have the support they need. Disability with dignity. Over the last 10 years, through a catalogue of punitive welfare policies, the dignity of people with disabilities has been degraded by the Conservatives. Not one, but 2 UN reports describe the government having committed systematic violations of the rights of disabled people, while their families have been driven to breaking point by cuts to social care. More disabled people are now living in poverty, and people have died because of this government's choice to make the most vulnerable pay for tax cuts for the few. Labour will end this cruelty, restoring the protections that disabled people and their families, many of whom shoulder the cost of their care, should expect in one of the richest countries in the world. Labour supports the principle of nothing about us without us. We will champion the social model of disability throughout government. Through our new Department for Women and Equalities, we will ensure that disabled people can be independent and equal in society, with choice and control over their own lives. Transform the workplace for disabled people by requiring that all employers be trained to better support them, while introducing mandatory disability pay gap reporting for companies with over 250 employees. End disability discrimination and update the Equality Act to introduce new specific duties, including disability leave, paid and recorded separately from sick leave. Recommend that the Equality and Human Rights Commission prepare a specific code of practice on reasonable adjustments to supplement existing codes. This will provide an appropriate balance between flexibility and clarity on how reasonable cost is determined. The code will also set timescales for implementation of reasonable adjustments to end the long and distressing delays experienced by disabled workers. Reinstate the Access to Elected Office Fund to enable disabled people to run for elected office. Adopt a British Sign Language Act, giving BSL full legal recognition in law. We will work with employers, trade unions, and public services to improve awareness of neurodiversity in the workplace and in society. LGBT+ equality. Labour has a proud history of standing shoulder to shoulder with LGBT+ people. We abolished Section 28, equalised the age of consent, created civil partnerships, and only with Labour votes could equal marriage become law. Labour is committed to reforming the Gender Recognition Act 2004 to introduce self-declaration for transgender people, but we are not complacent about the culture shift required to make LGBT+ inclusivity a reality. The Conservatives have been slow to understand the scale of abuse and discrimination LGBT+ people continue to face in our society. Labour will eliminate remaining areas of discrimination in law, ensuring that LGBT+ people can live in safety and dignity. We will put LGBT+ equality at the heart of government, ensuring our public services are LGBT+ inclusive and delivering on the National LGBT Action Plan. Take steps to safeguard LGBT+ rights inside or outside the EU, such as retaining and promoting the Human Rights Act. Tackle the homelessness and rough sleeping crisis in the UK, ensuring that all strategies and services are tailored to understand needs unique to LGBT+ homeless people, particularly young people, who make up a disproportionate number of our currently homeless people. Provide sufficient funding for schools to deliver mandatory LGBT+ inclusive relationships and sex education. Fully fund sexual health services and roll out PrEP medication. Respond fast and firmly wherever LGBT+ people face violence or persecution internationally, and appoint a dedicated global ambassador to the Foreign Office on LGBT+ issues. Labour will work with organisations